Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 40K Parley podcast. This is Book 1, Chapter 4. We're going to talk about spruing and gluing, aka cutting things out, putting it together, gluing it, getting that model built. I had the pleasure of visiting a friend recently who is an exceptional painter. Did it professionally for a while, still does commission here and there. And they had an extra box of Necromunda laying around and gifted it to me, knowing that I'm still pretty much a noob in the hobby. So I haven't done anything with Necromunda, with the miniatures, the models, the game. This is the 40K Parley, so I mean, we will be sticking to 40K, straight up tabletop Warhammer mainly. But for the sake of the podcast, I wanted to do something that wasn't 40K, specific to Warhammer 40K, for the reason of I wanted to open up this box and see how different it was from the actual 40K instructions, and kind of go into this a little blindly, like someone, or like me for instance, 5 months ago. So I opened up the Necromunda box, and there are 2 plastic sheets inside. And both of them have all the parts that you will need to make your minis, and the different, all the different variants, and there's all different arms, and you can mix and match the heads, but we'll get into that in just a little bit. Everything on these plastic sheets is coordinated to a number, and that's how you're going to know which piece to cut out once you look at the instruction manuals. I'll put up some pictures. I did take some pictures while I was building these and gluing these together. It's a little hard for me to stop gluing, especially if I have glue accidentally. It gets on things, especially when I was doing the basing. I was getting a lot of glue on my hands, so I couldn't. I didn't have a free hand to take pictures with, so I did my best, and I'll put up pictures here and there of what I'm talking about in the YouTube video. But for the sake of the podcast, I'll try and be as descriptive as I possibly can. So the other thing that came, 2 other things came with the box of Orlock Gang. There were the 2 plastic sheets, and then there were 10 bases. These took me for a loop, folks. First and most noticeable thing, I think anybody who plays 40K who's never opened up a box of Necromunda, we're being robbed. Their base plates are so much cooler than ours. I'm keeping these 10 Necromunda base plates, and I'm going to use them for my Gene Stealer cult, actually, because I think that if I painted these to look like drainage grating in a slaughterhouse, I think they would fit in awesome with my Fleischgate theme for Innerworm. So yeah, I'm totally saving these 10 bases for Gene Stealers. But I'm in luck because my friend also happened to give me a bag of bases. So I've never used aftermarket bases, and I figured also for the sake of this podcast, I would do some aftermarket basing as well. All right. Also in the box, that's where we were. So we have the 2 sheets. We have the Necromunda specific bases, and it comes with a manual. And I'm going to read the English on the Necromunda Gang, or the Necromunda Orlock Gang instruction manual. So this is what you get in us English speaking countries. I'm not talking about Le Monde Francophone or anything weird like that. Like right now, we're just talking English speaking countries. This is what it says. The huge variety of components included in this box set means you can make each of your gang members unique just by swapping a head, weapon, etc. And then we have to go down a little ways. Read this first. Before assembling your model kit, please read through the instructions in this booklet carefully. A pair of plastic cutters is required to remove plastic components in this kit from their frame. We advise using a molding scraping tool to clean up the parts. That's not how we spell molding. To assemble your model, you will need plastic glue. Games Workshop sells Citadel fine detail cutters, Citadel molding remover, and Citadel plastic glue. Both does not recommend using these products for use by children under the age of 16 without adult supervision. So, little Timmy, if you're 15, sorry, that means no cutters for you. Nope, you can't file a Warhammer Mini. If you're under the age of 16 and you dare get into Warhammer, you're poor parents. That's all I'm gonna say. Like, either they're gonna end up liking it more than you building and painting this, or they're just gonna completely give it to you at like age 9 and let you attempt to paint this horribly yourself, and then cry when your glue gets all messed up. That's just my opinion, man. At the bottom, it shows some highly detailed pictures. Actually, it's kind of funny because Orlock's, or excuse me, I keep calling it Orlock's Gang, as if somehow, Orlock himself is the leader of this gang, but it's not. It is a or the, I don't know. It just says Orlock Gang. Sorry, Necromunda players. I apologize if you listen to this podcast. Please forgive me. I don't know. But it just simply says Orlock Gang. So your minis, when you cut them off of the plastic sheets, I mean, it's almost always this dark gray. So the picture of Orlock Gang on the cover of the Necromunda instruction manual has these figures all in gray tone. And then at the bottom, it says, 16 plus in the top left of the graphic. And then in full color, it shows the plastic glue. It shows the Citadel fine detail cutters. They just look like really fancy versions of the ones that came in my paint kit. And the Citadel molding remover. It's very nice. But the like I said, once again, the one that came with the paint kit is more than adequate. I think it's awesome. And when you're basing, you can just hold it down with your thumb and then rub the bottom of the miniature ever so slightly, and you can get like a bit of a flatter edge on it before you decide to base. If you're doing a flat base, like a standard, just comes in a combat patrol base. We didn't do that this time. Oh boy, we went a little nuts. We went a little crazy over here. All right, let me keep reading in this instruction manual. Oh, doesn't look like there's much more to read. Yep, everything else is pretty much just numbers and pictures on how to assemble the model. Usually a model is quite a few pieces. So the first one of Orlock Gang is Zeke, and it's letting us know to pull the torso, back, the leg, 2 arms, shoulder blades, or shoulder pads rather, and a head form. And below it, this is just the thing. You'll see this is the same as Warhammer, so this is pretty cool. I mean, like this I caught right off the bat. If you see the little gear symbols, that means that there is an alternate build for something, or they call it, and here it says variant assembly. So you'll know, and it will show you, so for instance, Zeke is built from pieces 2, 3, and 1. And I don't know why I read them in that order. It's just the way I was looking at the picture, I guess. And if you're going to build Lander, you also need to put 2, 3, and 1 together. But whereas Zeke has 5 and 6 as his arms, 4 as his shoulder pads, and 51 as his head, we have Lander, who has 8 as his arm, 7 as his arm and gun, which do connect in the front, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. 31 for his shoulder pads, and 53. I didn't put any of the heads on until all of them were assembled, and that's only because, let's read it right from Games Workshop again. The huge variety of components included in this box set means you can make each of your gang members unique just by swapping a head, weapon, etc. So, needless to say, I swapped a few heads. I did one kit bash out of the set, and when we talk about kit bashing in a little bit, I'll go over that in a little bit more detail. Oh, I just dropped my box of Kinder. I am such a sloppy podcaster. So let's talk about the sheets a little bit. I talked a little bit about the instruction manuals, and I said how there's pieces and they correspond to numbers. Well, the numbers correspond to the outside of the molding on the plastic. And sometimes it can be a little tricky because you'll see 20 and 22 and they'll be directly parallel to each other. But if you look at it, you'll see that, like, oh, okay, well, this one's a weapon, or okay, that one's a right arm and this one's a left arm. Use the instruction manuals. For your first builds, I mean, I would give it, yeah, like, have fun, do some customization, but on the same token, I would, stick to the instruction manual until you really feel comfortable putting these things together. Just like I said, with Zeke or Lander, you're going to cut out pieces, 1, 2, and 3, and you're going to put those together for both of them. And, like, you're building them at the same time. You can build them at the same time, which is what I did, which is known as like shadow building. So if you have two sheets that are the same, you can look at them and be like, all right, so I need 1, 2, and 3 from both of these sheets. So you find 1, 2, and 3, cut those out. Then you can lay the sheet over the other one and see where 1, 2, and 3 were cut out pretty easily, and then just take those right out. You can also mark them with a Sharpie, although a lot of people like to save the chaff and the sprue sheets and use them for other things, for building scenery on battlefields. Or there's a guy on Instagram who, the Sprue Army, I think, and his entire channel is just soldiers made out of sprues. And I don't know if it's one guy or a bunch of people or what, but it's definitely a great concept. I think he's got a couple of Space Marines built on there. So when you are shadow building, especially when you're batch building, shadow building is important because you're going to get like 2 of the same, sprue sheets, and you can just, do stuff like that. With this Necromunda Orlock Gang, though, you had, like I said, 1, 2, and 3 could both come off the same sheet. But what I did was I cut Zeke off of one sheet. All the alternate builds in here, by the way, are also marked by the color blue, whereas the assemble first builds are all marked with red numbers and lettering for the names. So Zeke, who was red, I cut off. Everybody who was red, I pretty much took off of one sprue sheet. And then everybody like Lander, who was blue, I cut off of the other sprue sheet. That way you have a good idea of what is and what isn't left, and you're not left with one sprue with just, like 2 things on it, and then you just end up cutting them out, losing them, and it just, to me, it makes more sense to organize them this way. I'm sure other people do other things. I'm sure people just kit bash these things right off the bat. Lord knows, I certainly thought about just putting extra limbs on guys, because I'm a lunatic who loves gene stealers. So when you get into kit bashing, oh man. Yeah, I mean, get really, really creative. Just have fun. But the numbers correspond to the gray sheets. And like I said, so for instance, when I was building Zeke and Lander, I went through and I cut out 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Something else I want to say to do when you are cutting. One of the first things you need to do is get rid of your burrs and screws. And I used to think that it was okay to, just cut everything out, put everything in a pile, and then just start assembling it. Thinking that I could just sprue everything, before I assembled it. And I'd always forget where one point connected, or something wouldn't fit right. And sometimes that's Games Workshop, and sometimes that is you not sanding down a sprue or a burr on a model. You have to be careful when sanding, because you don't want to take too much detail, or like say you go to curve your tool while you're sanding, you could take too much off of another edge. I've done that. Yeah, I've gone to use an X-Acto knife to take off a burr and cut off like a eighth of a shoulder pad and being like, ah, boy. Battle damage, right? Battle damage. That's what it was. I did it on purpose. I meant to do that. To the late great Pee Wee. One other thing, just for safety's sake, when you're using these tools, obviously, I mean, there's a reason why the book says 16-year-old. I don't, want to go against that. Here's what I'm going to say: if you're going to use an X-Acto knife, always cut away from yourself. I have seen way too many people take an X-Acto knife, try to whittle something forward themselves as little as a piece of plastic, and put the X-Acto knife into their thumb or into their finger or into their arm. I've seen people do some dumb things. Always cut away from yourself. If you're going to use an X-Acto knife to get your sprues off, cut away from yourself. I've worked in hundreds of kitchens, maybe not hundreds, but dozens of kitchens. I've worked in dozens of kitchens, and it's knife safety is just such an important thing. Especially if you're a crafter, just take care of your fingers, man. Watch where your scissors are going. Watch your X-Acto knives. Make sure there's no blades. The other night, while I was trying to take a picture while building these Necromunda models, I accidentally knocked the table lamp, and because I was using a little clamp lamp that I use when I build and paint, just to give my area a little bit of extra light, and that bumped the cutters right off the table open, and that went right into my foot, and I was not wearing a shoe, and it didn't do any damage or anything. I'm not oh boo-hoo, but needless to say, it was a sharp thing, and it could have been a lot worse. So accidents happen, and as people that are into crafts and hobbies like this, just be careful. Always cut away if you can, and get your fingers out of the way. Not that I've ever seen anybody do this, but get your fingers out of the way when you're cutting things off the sheets too. All right, I can put down the X-Acto knife. I was holding it as a token for the for the podcast. You need to talk about knife safety with an X-Acto knife. So what else? Okay, gluing. Now Zeke and Lander, once again, you've got 1, 2, 3, and both of those will be the two legs and the torso of two different models. So, once you have those, like I said, get rid of the burrs and the sprues right away. And then once you have every piece cut out, I usually, put it aside into a pile. And for Zeke and Lander, I had two piles, a Zeke pile and a Lander pile, obviously. And then I started putting things together. Everything but the head. I wasn't sold on which heads I was going to put where. In fact, I think in the finished product, Zeke's head may have ended up on Rocky's body. Yes, Zeke's head is on Rocky's body. I thought they had this old, punk rock bartender with a mechanical arm. That was a pretty cool decision there. So. I'd go through and I'd glue 1, 2, 3. So I'd glue the leg into the front, and then I'd put the back of the torso on, and I'd make it into one solid piece. Glue 1, 2, 3. Then I would put that back with Zeke stuff. Then I'd move over to the Lander pile, take 1, 2, 3, glue them together. Then I'd move back over to the Zeke, and the glue if the pieces are solid. It can go together and it can stay together really, really well. In some instances, when you're trying to balance something, it's never going to work well. Whenever your margin of error is less than 2 millimeters, and there's a lot of hands and wrists and things like that, weapon pommels, there's just less than 2 millimeter margin of error, then it's very hard to get that. You're going to be sitting there for 10 to 15 minutes just holding it. For a lot of these bases, I probably held them for 7 to 10 minutes. I'd say that basing, usually is a snap when I get to the end. I just make sure that the bottom of the mini can lay flat, and if not, I'll sand or cut a little bit off and get it to perch right, and then just glue it on. These bases, I'll put up some pictures, have some terrain on them. It's really nice. They have corrugated steel that's like busted off of rubble and pieces of like cinder blocks and things like that. So yeah, the bases are really nice. I've never done anything like this, but it did take me more time. That was for damn sure. So anyways, we got our two piles. We have our Zeke pile and our Lander pile. 1, 2, 3 are both assembled for both of them. So Zeke, we start gluing on the shoulder pad first. That's when you see the instructions, it's not really kind of clear as to how you should do that. But if you put the shoulder pads on first, you get a little bit more leeway with how you're going to pose and put the arms on because of the way the glue works. This glue, it's an adhesive, but it works like an acid with plastic. And it can, fuse and bond the plastic. So if you press on it hard enough, it will mold. If you have enough glue and you press on it hard enough, it can mold to the shape you need. So you can, pretty much pose and put things where you want them within reason. Like I wouldn't want to show any giant gaps or anything like that. Nothing that I'm not at the point where I'm, using green fill or green putty. I'm still just trying to do things, on my base Warhammer budget of, what I have and see what I can do. And luckily I've had a couple friends that really love me and love what I do, and were willing to give me some models to play with. So I'm definitely appreciative to all the people out there that listen, and all the fans I have that want to see the show succeed. That is really, really cool. But anyways, yeah. Back to assembly. Zeke. So we got the arm 5, and then we got the arm 6, and we got those glued on. Now I did not glue the head on Zeke because, like I said, I wasn't sure if I wanted that head on Zeke, and like I said, it ended up on the Rocky model body. But Lander, I don't think Lander ended up with that head either. Now that I think about it, let's see, where's Lander? Nope, Lander ended up with a much more splatterpunk, gas mask and mohawk kind of vibe on that body. For him, it was a little bit different. So still put the shoulder pads on first, which in this instance are 31. And now the guns are pieces 7 and 8, and they connect in the front. So piece 8, for those listening and not, looking, piece 8 is half an arm. Or, a better description is an arm with no fingers. And then piece 7 is an arm holding a gun, and it has fingers underneath it. So you need to get a feel for how the arms are going to fit into the socket and how the hands are going to connect, because all those things need to look good. So here's what I did. I fiddled with it for a few times, and just to see how it would fit, how it would look, how close I would need it to be to the body. If I would need to, do I have any versatility for action posing, like anything like that? Like I said, I put 7 and 8 in the sockets and just, kind of felt around and saw if it would fit in which ways. So once I have a good idea of how I want the shoulders to fit, I will glue the hand on the front of the gun. This isn't right for every occasion. And when I'm later on in the instruction manual, I'll talk about another reason why. I'll just talk about them now. Zed Hackjaw. It's actually 3 pieces. So there's parts of the gun that you'd want to put together before you decided to mount the shoulder. Yeah, that definitely happened with Zed Hackjaw. But the concept of how I glued it, it was still the same. I just added a piece to the gun first. Because it was just set in stone the way that those 2 pieces needed to line up, and then I aimed the shoulders accordingly. So, like I said, I don't glue in the arms on Lander. I glue the hand and hold the arms in place. So now the hand that is holding, that's, no fingers is now has fingers and is under the gun. And I let that sit for probably a good 6-7 minutes before I'll even move my fingers, and just make sure that bonds fully. And here's the reason why. The next thing I do is take an X-Acto knife and slowly and very, very tiny, like just a very, very tiny hole. Use the X-Acto knife to open up, to pull the shoulder out a little, get into that socket, and just put a tiny bit of glue in and then press the arm back in so that the gun does not come apart in the front and that it adheres to itself. And then you hold that arm for however long, you feel. I'd say, 5 minutes. And for pieces, like I said, when you have that very, very, 3 to 2 millimeter margin of error, you might need a good 15 minutes holding something. I built some Wraith Guard, and their axes. Oh boy, I am so glad I didn't pick dual swords when I made my Wraith Blades, because did I say Wraith Guard? I meant Wraith Blades. Sorry, little self-annotation there. When I built my Wraith Blades, I built them with axes and the shield. So the shield was fairly easy. I mean, it's really no different than putting on any Eldari ornamental piece. But the axe itself, man, oh man, each one, I must have sat there holding for at least 15 minutes just to get those axes right. And then I actually was at a friend's house and we were putting them together, and I left them there. So I was like, I don't want to move these. I don't want these going in a car ride. I just need them to sit. I'll come back in, 48 hours and grab these. Are you cool with that? And of course they were. Don't just leave crap at your friend's house. That's not cool. We're okay. So anyways, like I said, for pieces like that connect in the front, my recommendation is to connect them in the front. And then, like I said, use an X-Acto knife to just lightly pry out the shoulder, and then just put a little tiny piece of glue in. You can use model airplane glue. The Citadel plastic glue comes with a very nice syringe-like top. So for doing things like this, where you take an X-Acto knife, put it into the shoulder blade, and then pop it out and put in a little bit of glue, that little syringe-like tip is very, very nice. I will say that if you go to a hobby shop and buy an equivalent amount of glue, the only thing that's going to be different is the tip. Oh, and the price. Usually it's a few bucks cheaper when you go to the hobby shop, like the Train Store. We got a New England's weird. So we have some shops that just sell stuff for trains. And then there's other stores that sell model kits with cars and such will also sell Warhammer. So I mean, you'll have a different selection of glues there, but for the most part, I use right now I've been using the Citadel plastic glue that came with my paint kit, and when or maybe this didn't come with a paint kit. Maybe I bought this separately. Either way, I'm about halfway through this, and I don't know, I've gotten about, I'd say at this point, 70 or 80 minis done. So I mean, yeah, that's not bad. But like I said, it is cheaper if you don't mind not having the syringe tip. You can cut it to specifications or use a Dremel to put a tiny hole in the. You're essentially paying for the convenience of having the syringe tip on the Citadel one. You also have to clean it off. I don't like using the X-Acto knife because I like using that as just a blade. But I have been known to take the pliers for the cutting tools, whatever you want to call them, and then just quickly rubbing, once again, rub the blade away from you, that off to get the excess glue off the tip, so every time you pull the cap off, it doesn't rip the needle out with it. Yeah, just a little helpful tip there. um, Another thing, when you're building these models, man, check and double check that you are cutting off the right piece, or that the piece looks like the piece in the picture. For the life of me, when I was cutting off piece 6 for Zeke, the gun in the picture looks kind of like this. From the angle it shows it in the picture, it looks like Schwarzenegger in Terminator 2 there, where he's got the sawn off, and he's just kind of like, just flipping it on the. It looks like that, like it's a little lever action with like a sawn off lever action. But when you look at the um, the actual character, it's not so. It's much more of a pistolish weapon, a little like a pistola. So yeah, it like I said, the angle of it in the picture, like always check and double check. Like I must have looked over 6 about 24 times to make sure I was about to cut the right piece off of the plastic sheet. I have cut the wrong piece off before. You will cut the wrong piece off. It happens. Or you'll get overzealous. You know what I mean? Like that happens too, and you'll just start cutting things, and it's like, no. That's for another thing, or that's for this. When I was doing the appearance, there were some heads that I really wanted to use, but I would have had to spend a lot of time, carving them down to put. And I was like, you know what, this is just more work than, and I rearranged the heads, and I think they came out good. I like the way they look. I think I painted them nicely. Whatever. I'll be painting up those the acolytes soon, I believe. That ought to be a blast. Hoping I can spend some time doing that this weekend. Anyways, back to spruing and gluing over here. So, like I said, always double check to make sure that you are cutting the right piece off the plastic. And like I said, if you're not comfortable building, 2 models at the same time, don't. But like I said, if you have 2 sprues like this that shadow each other, and you have the instructions right next to each other for the assemble first and for the variant assembly. One thing I will say, in Warhammer, variant assemblies can mean a few different things. They can mean an alternate aesthetic, they can mean an alternate weapon, then they can mean an alternate unit altogether. This Orlock game seems to be pretty straightforward, and it kind of let me know that I could mix and match it. And there's not a giant. When you look at a Warhammer sheet, there's usually on the back of it a page that just explains what all the different weapons are capable of doing, essentially, so you know what you can and can't put on your models. And that is not present in Necromunda, but it is definitely something that is present in Warhammer 40K. Like I said in my last episode, I mentioned that when painting an army, please paint it however you'd like. You know what I mean? Like just go nuts. But I would ask as a concession that for the sake of there being 150 models on the battlefield, that you do respect and pay attention to things like weapons, because it can get hard to keep track of. Let's see. What else can we talk about? What else? Where can we go from here? I've talked about the different kinds of glue. I mean, gosh. Oh boy. Finishing the model. Oh boy. So I like to get everything on the model finished before I put it on the base. And sometimes I will let it dry overnight even. Like if you're trying to base and say like you pinch the model and you've only had that glue on there for a half an hour, you could press the shoulder pads right into the mini, and now your character's a little bit shorter than all your other members of your Orlock gang. And when you're basing, like I said, feel free to sand down your bottoms and just make sure that you hold it on there. This is my first time using, aftermarket bases like this, and I think they look awesome. That's another thing with Warhammer is that you'll get frustrated with it, but when you're done, you're just like, damn, like there's that sense of accomplishment. And I think that's a really, really, rewarding part of this hobby. What else can I talk about? Oh, kit bashing. We haven't gotten into that yet. So, one of the members of Orlock's Gang, let's see, John Crow, who does not have John Crow's head, just so we are clear. Let's see, whose head does John Crow have? John Crow has... No, it has Gunner Ski as the head. I thought that was a cool head. It's got a shaved head, got a little beard, looks a little like me. So I figured I would kit bash a Necromunda gang member with 2 blades. So he's got these 2 I wouldn't call them swords necessarily. They're very big. They're big, dirky knives. They look like oversized Rambo knives. And like a giant dirk. I don't know, the dirk. We'll go with that. And then the model usually comes with a gun. So I shaved one side of the gun down. I cut the hand that was holding the gun off, and then I smoothed that down, so it looks like just the handle of a gun. And then I glued that onto the back of this mini with 2 dirks. And then I took a chain off of... I didn't use the harpoon gun. I used the minigun. So I cut the chain off the top of the harpoon gun, and then I glued it to the top of the kit bashed gun onto the back, and then into the corner of the shoulder pad, so it looks like the chain is holding the gun on the back. So this is something that I will do with Warhammer 40K. If I want to have a weapon or a pose that the character doesn't have, I'll find a way to put the weapon to represent that they do have that weapon somewhere on the model. So for instance, I have a Wraith Lord with a sword mounted on his side. So he has, his hands are doing other things. And so for instance, my little, Orlock Gang here, who I was kind of kit bashing for fun to, kind of painting my own, likeness. I put the gun on the back, and, I'm quite fond of swords myself, so I gave him 2 giant dirks to play around with. And on top of things, he brought the gun, to the knife fight. There are a lot of guns in this fight, too. But yeah, like, I'll put up pictures of the kit bash, and if you follow the 40K Parley Instagram account, I'll be putting up more detailed pictures and close-ups of the models soon as well. There's already some pictures of the models up, and over the course of the next week, I'll probably show off some more of the individual building. I want to talk about the minigun, because that was actually built, like I said, in 3. The arms, it was the arm, and then the gun attached to one of the arms, and it's kind of like holding it. And then there's a handle, and then an arm that attaches to the hand on the handle. So that was 1, 2, 3 pieces. So I glued the hand onto the handle on one side, and then I put a little bit of adhesive on the hand on the other side and held the shoulders in place. And then I did the exact same thing I did with the other gunner that had both hands dedicated to one weapon. I opened up his shoulders a little bit with the X-Acto knife. Like I said, I have not applied any glue to the shoulder sockets at this point. Not until I put the X-Acto knife in, pry it out just a little bit. You go too hard, it's just gonna fall apart. Model building is frustrating. It is probably one of my least favorite parts of out of the 3 steps, it's my least favorite. But I will say that's what drives things like kit bashing. Like you want to you want to build something different. You want to show people things that they haven't seen. And then, your paint job comes on top of that. You know what I mean? Like there's a level of customability or customization, excuse me. There's a level of customization involved in 40K that I am absolutely in love with. And like I said, I didn't have to use pardon me. I didn't have to use the Warhammer bases this time around, so I went with these, awesome aftermarket bases. And they're going to get primed with the model. Now there's something to think about. I don't know what camp most people are in. Games Workshop almost always displays their stuff with bases while they are priming them. Some people do not paint on or prime on base, and I'm not going to say that's right or wrong, because if you want to put more detail into something, by all means. I mean, you don't have to base it, and you can spend that extra time working on detail, and then do the basing afterwards, or do a more intricate base while you're working on the model. There are dozens of reasons why you would do that, but oh boy, I'm throwing around the chain gunner. Luckily, I did a decent job of gluing him, so he's still in one piece. I have seen models fall and break, and it's everyone in the room just goes. You just hear that collective sucking of teeth. It's so bad. But like I said, like it's the whole time you're doing it, you're just holding these models together for like I said, sometimes it's 5 minutes and like you're good. Like when you're putting the leg into pretty much, they're not pushed to fit, but they've got little grooves so you can kind of just guide the glue in a little bit, and the glue's not sliding all over the place, which is definitely nice. I appreciate that. Thank you, Warhammer. Thank you, Games Workshop, rather. Warhammer Overlord, Games Workshop. Where were we? Oh, he got lost during his own podcast again. This man is just amazing. Basing. So, like I said, I have always based. But then again, like I've never put any detail into any of my bases either. I'm not at that level yet. I want to. I'm going to. I just have not. So for now, if you're a noob in the hobby like me, I would recommend gluing onto the base, especially if you did go out and buy a model holder. Like it's made to be used with a base. Like you have to, slap it on that base and put it on there. That's not to say, like I said, that you just couldn't, cut, a wooden dowel, put some blue tack on the top, and then you don't even need a base for that. You just stick the model right on there, and you can just paint, the model stuck in the blue tack. There's, I've seen that done, on YouTube a few times. So I recommend, just for the sake of playability and just, like I said, there are people that, yes, your models aren't done, you haven't based. Okay, but they are, they're playable and they are painted, and I think I did an okay job. I'm not saying I did a great job or even a good job, but I think I did an okay job. I'm only getting better. Folks. Anyways, I'm going to just look over my notes real quick. I don't know that there's anything else I really need to talk about. We could maybe cut this, we don't have to hit the hour mark on this episode. We don't have to do that. Just a couple of things to remember. Like I said, just, always be safe with the cutting tools and always make sure that you are looking at the numbers and making sure that they correspond to the right parts. And like I said, check and double check. Because I can't tell you how many times well, actually I can, because I have all the loose pieces. I think it's around 7 or 8. They're all sitting in the bottom of a tool bin that I keep my paints in. So, yeah, like, you will cut extra things off because you make mistakes. Humans, we inevitably will do that. Take your burrs off right away. That's another just hot tip. You don't want to forget about it. I have an absolutely beautiful Wraith Lord, and I'm never going to say where it is, and I'm never going to point it out, but it has a freaking burr on it. And I know where it is, and I see it every time I look at it, and it effing drives me insane. But, like, and it's just funny to me because I put so much effort into every other piece of that model, but I just forgot, while I was, cutting out the model, to just take the time to take that one piece and then just take a little extra effort and just scrape and sand down the back of one of the pieces. It drives me nuts when I see it on the model now, and it sticks out like a sore thumb to me because I know it's there. So, just for the sake of having really nice models, always take, your sprue tool, always take your X-Acto knife, and just get rid of your burrs right away. And trust me, even with that, you'll still forget them. And I'm going to say you might not need to pay a ton of attention to the ones on the bottom of the feet. But you are going to want to make sure that your character can stand flat. They might not all have the balance to do so. For instance, half of the Orlock Gang, can stand, or I'd say more than that. Let's say 6 of them have 2-leg stances, and 4 of them have a 1-leg stance where they're kind of like in motion. So those ones were a lot more trickier to glue. You're going to spend more time holding something that can stand up on its, on its own merit, as opposed to something that has, 2 legs spread and has kind of a flat, narrow, 50-50 stance to it. So something else just to think about there. Is that, just the poses of some of the figures are going to be a little bit harder while you are basing to put on. I didn't really cover gluing bigger things or vehicles. Vehicles they're a pain in the butt, but once they are done, and once you slap that first coat of primer on, you're like, yeah, this is starting to look like something. It's hard to look at your models and judge them before you prime them. And like I said, even your first, I usually do a quick coat, a prime on the front, and then I go to the back, and then I hit like at a 45-degree angle onto the back with my primer. I'll go over priming a little bit more, obviously, in painting, but for the sake of sticking on spruing and gluing, when you get to that first primer coat, and you prime them whatever color, whether it's White Scar or Wraithbone or Lead Belcher or Abaddon, any of those colors, it's you're gonna be like, wow, it looks better than it's gonna look when it's gray or and just sitting on basic black bases. So yeah, I think we're good with this one. I think we can wrap this up a little bit early. Save me some headache with the editing, and yeah, let's put we're not, something that I keep forgetting to mention. Damn me. In the last episode when we were talking about choosing an army, just something that I've mentioned it, but kind of only in passing. When you're thinking about this hobby, another thing that you might want to do is go to a Games Workshop store or go to a magazine shop that carries more alternative magazines and see if they have White Dwarf, and pick up a copy of White Dwarf. It's like the Games Workshop sanctioned magazine. It features absolutely phenomenal artwork. It gives narrative play. It gives alternate play. It gives missions, campaigns. It gives spotlights on people who paint. It's an absolutely amazing way to see what people do with this hobby. So something I didn't mention about getting into this hobby is maybe if you're thinking about it and don't want to spend $500, well, maybe just spend $12 and finger through a White Dwarf. That sounded really, really dirty. I'm leaving that in though. That is for sure staying in. Buy a White Dwarf, read through it, and I was gonna make another innuendo, but I'll keep it at one. Folks, we are done with book 1, chapter 4. But like I said, just that little side note. If you want to get into the hobby and you just want to check out and see what I'm talking about and what we're doing here, pick up a White Dwarf and just look through it and see what this hobby is all about. You'll find that there are all different kinds of games, and like I said, it goes over everything. Right now they're doing A Tale of Four Warlords, and I am thoroughly enjoying those articles. They talk about how these they alternate every month, and I've been reading about the 40K painters and players, and it's just they pit them against each other in like this insane. I wouldn't say insane, but definitely interesting to say the least. Insane from my perspective as a noob challenge, and I think they have to paint like a combat patrol and play as many games as humanly possible with it every month to try to promote that little like Warhammer worldwide thing they're doing. I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head. If I had a white dwarf in front of me, I'd know. But anyways, like I said, White Dwarf is definitely something that I enjoy reading, and when I think it was one of the first things I did when I got into the hobby was went out and bought myself a White Dwarf. I had bought them as a young adult because they would have like extra missions for Hero Quest, and then when I got into Advanced Warhammer Quest, or it was an Advanced Warhammer, it was Advanced Hero Quest, and then there was Warhammer Quest. So when I was into Warhammer Quest, I would read White Dwarf, and they would, give like the different bad guys and scenarios and all kinds of cool stuff like that, and just little extra fun lore for you to read and while you were playing it. It really, added to the ambiance and atmosphere. Just little fun things like that. All right, let's close the book up tonight. We are closing up Book 1, Chapter 4, Spruing and Gluing. I hope I did a little bit of justice talking about this. I know it's one of those things where you just have to do it, right? It's like you can watch videos on carving a pumpkin. That's great. Until you carve a pumpkin, you have not carved a pumpkin. So until you have sat down and glued some minis, you're like, until you go through this. And your first time's going to be rough. And I'm going to tell you this, stick with it. It is rewarding. Do not give up. Like, don't let this be the phase of the game where you get defeated. You know what I mean? There's 3 periods. Like, do not get defeated in the first period. Don't let that happen, because it will make painting and playing not fun too. Like, it'll just be a constant reminder of how miserable you were building. I know people that, like there are people that don't want to build. There are people that don't want to paint. There are people that don't want to play. Like, I mean, there are plenty of people that just paint minis. However you do this Warhammer 40K thing, like, let's do this. Like, this is awesome. I absolutely love it. And like I said, I've really been enjoying the support of the community. And like I said, just playing, painting, and building. This is so much fun. It has been such a wild ride and a trip. We are closing the book. We're doing it now. Book 1, Chapter 4 is ended. Folks, thank you for listening. Please subscribe.